Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Sammy Vapor Studios, and today we're diving deep into the long-awaited trailer for 28 Years Later. And let me just say, this one hits different. It's grim, it's primal, and it evolves the rage mythos in ways that feel both grounded and absolutely terrifying. We're going to be breaking this down frame by frame. Originally, I was planning to do a trailer reaction for the very first trailer, but since a brand new one just dropped recently, and it's currently sitting at number 2 on trending, I figured this was the perfect opportunity to jump onto it, especially since I actually have the time right now. Just a heads up, I'll be pausing the trailer from time to time to comment on specific scenes, which not only lets us dive deeper into the details, but also helps keep this video compliant with fair use law. Before we jump in, I'll also be diving into some theories surrounding key scenes and characters, including the possible return of Cillian Murphy's character in the future sequels, the symbolism behind the Bone Temple, and the unsettling evolution of the infected. On top of that, I'll also be briefly analyzing the eerie poem that was used in the trailer and what it could mean for the story's tone and direction. Plus, I'll also be sharing some of my own theories, including how the survivors managed to stay alive for this long on the island, and my personal prediction for where the plot might be heading in this third chapter of the saga. If that sounds interesting, then let's get right into it. We open strong, soldiers in the dark, ambushed by a beast of a rage infected. But here's the catch, these infected, they've evolved. Gone are the days of skinny, twitchy runners. This one in particular is jacked, muscular, maintaining mass. That suggests a longer infection lifespan or maybe selective adaptation. These aren't just zombies on a timer anymore, they're efficient predators. And look at the way it moves, calculated, brutal. This hints at increased intelligence. One solid theory for how the infected maintained their muscle mass after 28 years could tie into both evolution and environmental adaptation. In the original 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, the infected burned through energy rapidly, which suggested they'd die off quickly from starvation or physical breakdown. But if they lasted this long, something clearly changed. One possibility is that over time, the virus evolved, mutating into a more stable version that allows the infected to enter a low-energy state, almost like a form of dormancy or hibernation. Instead of constantly running and burning muscle, they may have developed the ability to conserve energy, only becoming active when stimuli such as sound, light, or movement trigger them. Another theory is that they adapted to their environment and began feeding in new, unexpected ways. Maybe they've become scavengers or even cannibalistic, consuming weaker infected or animals to stay alive. That could explain their retained muscle mass and ferocity. It's also possible that the infected population that we're seeing in the trailer are second or even third generation, born or reinfected long after the original outbreak. These newer infected may be stronger, more resilient, and possibly even more intelligent, and that would explain their more calculated behavior, like the group slowly advancing on the hill in the trailer. Next up, we're introduced to the fortress, A self-contained society on an island, surrounded by water, nature's last defense. Survivors have built their own world. Wooden carts, handcrafted arrows, homemade dummies for training. You can tell that they've been here for years, generations maybe. But pay close attention. This community isn't thriving, it's surviving. The dummies, the preparation, the arrow craftsmanship. These people are anticipating conflict, likely from the infected, or maybe even worse, other humans.
There were so many dead. Infected and non-infected alike.
That's why our home is so precious.
So we get a grim visual. Bodies, lots of them, not buried. That line, so many dead, infected and non-infected alike. That line says it all. This isn't just a virus, it's a societal collapse that never fully recovered. We're seeing the aftermath of decades of breakdown, hygiene, humanity, gone. And now, here's the first big theory moment. We see a group of men lifting a heavy bar to open the fortress gates. That's not a casual thing, that's a security protocol. So the question becomes, why open it? My theory? The outside world is a no man's land, crawling with infected and potentially hostile survivors. You don't open that door unless you're desperate. This hints at dwindling supplies, maybe food, medicine, tech, whatever keeps the island functional. And this might not be out of sheer curiosity, this might be a necessity. They're sending people back out to scavenge or to make first contact, and they might not be ever coming back.
You know, I feel he's a bit young.
He's ready, Jen.
7, 6, 11, 5.
Once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescues.
Another intriguing element from the trailer is the isolated stronghold believed to be the Holy Island, surrounded by water and connected to the mainland by a single narrow causeway. A key shot shows a bearded man walking with a boy across the passage, away from a fortress-like gate. So, how did the islanders survive for so long? The most obvious answer is geography. The tide likely floods the causeway at intervals, cutting off access and turning the island into a natural quarantine zone. This isolation gave the islanders time to develop their own systems, using bows, flaming arrows, and relying on fishing, farming, rainwater, and scavenging. Beyond survival, this isolation could have created a tight-knit, hardened community, possibly distrustful of outsiders. That might explain why Spike is being trained so young. It's a survivalist culture. The Holy Island may be the last bastion of civilization, a sanctuary, but also a target for the infected, raiders, or fanatics like the cults. They didn't survive just by luck on its own. They managed to survive by being smart, prepared, and disconnected. But even then, they might not stay safe forever. Now, let's talk about Spike. This kid is clearly central. The older man, possibly a leader or mentor figure, is pushing for him to be sent out. Jenny, presumably the mother or guardian, objects, but the man insists, saying that he's ready. Now, this isn't some coming-of-age moment. This is militarized responsibility. Spike isn't going out for adventure. He's going because the island needs something. It could be a test run, or he's carrying something vital, a message, a sample, or maybe even hope. And yeah, that line later on, once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescues, well, that says it all. This isn't just a round-trip journey, it's a suicide mission disguised as a rite of passage. And then there's this moment, absolutely chilling. We see a masked figure, very likely a cult member, and in the background we hear Boots by Rudyard Kipling. That's not just some creepy background noise, that's psychological warfare. Now, Boots is a haunting military poem about endless marching, repetition, and the mental collapse of soldiers. It was written to reflect the madness and monotony of war, but here, it's being used to reflect the psychological decay of this world. Played on repeat, it would break anyone. If this cult is using that poem as a mantra, that's not just atmosphere, that's indoctrination. It implies that they're militant, organized, and perhaps even brainwashing their followers into believing that the infection is a holy judgment. We're not just dealing with survivors anymore, we're facing religious or militaristic fanatics who see the virus as sacred. That's what makes this group so terrifying. It's not just the infected who are dangerous anymore, it's the people who want the infection to spread. The cult might end up being the true villains of 28 years later, because they've not just been consumed by rage, instead they're consumed by faith. In this scene, we see children's drawings of dead stick figures. Heavy stuff. It implies that the younger generation has grown up surrounded by death. It's become normalized.
Moving up and down again. Don't. Look at what's in front of you.
Meanwhile, in other scenes, we can see that the man is with Spike on the mainland, using bows, sneaking through abandoned homes, and we also see that crawling infected, still functional, still dangerous, and that tells us that these things are persistent.
The bullets in the bandoliers.
And now we're in chaos mode, soldiers being ambushed, men scrambling up ladders in the fortress, classic 28 style panic. Then there's the woman and child running to a gas station. It explodes, but somehow they survive. Could it have been a trap, or maybe a signal flare? Either way, the explosion isn't just action, it's strategy. Now here's something that I couldn't help but think. The petrol station sitting in the background, prime opportunity. If this were anything like the original 28 Days Later, then they could have easily rigged it to blow. Do you remember when Selena and Mark used a petrol bomb to detonate the station and take out the swarm of the infected? Not only was it brutal and effective, it bought them just enough time to escape. And in this trailer, that same strategy could have worked. An explosion like that would have at least slowed the infected down, created a wall of fire, or even funneled them into a trap. It's that classic mix of survival instinct and using the environment to your advantage. It would have been chaotic, it also would have been smart, and maybe that's what the case could be for this.
There are many kinds of death. And some are better than others.
In this scene, we see that Ralph Fiennes' character, Dr. Kelson, delivers a very chilling line. There are many kinds of death. Later, he follows it with, some are better than others. Just before we see birds bursting out of an abandoned train carriage, another shot reveals a dark, ominous area near what appears to be the fortress gates, with black birds swarming like bats, reinforcing the atmosphere of decay and dread. We see what might be the cult's stronghold, towers of skulls, bones arranged with eerie precision. These aren't random piles, this is ritualistic. Then we see an infected person using what appears to be a red tool or blunt object to strike a soldier, another sign of increased intelligence. These things are learning. They're not just hunters now, they're thinking predators. The infected in the 28 Days Later universe aren't entirely mindless, as shown by moments like the infected Don Harris using the butt end of an M4 rifle to kill Scarlet in 28 Weeks Later. This act wasn't just raw brutality, it demonstrated a level of residual intelligence and instinctive problem solving. Although he didn't fire the weapon, he clearly recognized it as a tool and used it effectively as a blunt object. This suggests that the rage virus doesn't completely wipe out a person's cognitive abilities, but instead heightens aggression while leaving behind some fine motor skills and environmental awareness. Instances like these imply that the infected are capable of basic decision-making, using objects in their surroundings, and even acting on remnants of memory or emotion. If this semi-intelligent behavior is still present or even evolved in 28 years later, it could make the infected far more dangerous. Imagine them coordinating attacks or using tools more frequently. It's a chilling possibility that elevates them far above the typical zombie threat. Anyway, here's my opinion on Dr. Kelson as a character. The first impressions of Dr. Kelson, the shaven head, stoic expression, and chilling delivery of his lines suggest that he's a character steeped in control, knowledge, and possibly moral ambiguity. Ralph Fiennes brings this eerie calmness to him, like someone who's seen too much and has made peace with doing terrible things for what he believes is the greater good. His line, "There are many kinds of death, some are better than others," hits like something that you'd hear from a man who's made harsh decisions, maybe even sacrificed others in the name of survival or science. That cold logic, combined with Dr. Kelson's appearance, clean-shaven with a shaved head, yet dressed in rugged, unkempt clothing, gives off the impression of a hardened government or scientific authority figure. He looks like someone who's been in the field for a long time, possibly deeply involved in studying the infected, or, more disturbingly, focused on containing them through cold, calculated, and extreme measures. He might be someone who sees humanity not in black and white, but in percentages, who lives by utilitarian logic, like if he had to choose between letting 5 people die or saving 500, he wouldn't blink. He gives off a mix of cold intellectualism and quiet menace, the kind of character who won't physically harm you, but might calmly explain why you're expendable in a crisis. If I had to guess from just the trailer, he's not the villain in the traditional sense, but he's probably not a hero either. More like a necessary evil, or a man with secrets tied to the infection that could either doom or save what's left of civilization. One standout moment shows silhouettes of black, shadowy figures, presumably the infected, standing on a hill as they slowly make their way across the horizon. Their behavior feels calculated, possibly showing signs of intelligence as they pause, almost as if assessing the situation before attacking. In this scene, we see Jodie Comer's character holding a baby, possibly symbolizing the hope for a future. Spike is also inside the bus with her. Could this be later in the timeline? Or maybe there's some kind of brand new makeshift family. Either way, this is the first time that we see any kind of softness in the trailer. And we also see the emaciated infected here, stripped down to just skin and bone, and yet is still active. Now, here's the bit that everyone was talking about when the very first trailer had dropped for 28 years later, and that was the emaciated infected. When people first saw this figure sprinting towards the camera, the internet went absolutely wild, thinking that it was Cillian Murphy returning as an infected Jim. But if we zoom in, we can clearly see that it is not him. The facial features don't match up close, and the infected's build is way too thin. If anything, this infected represents a different strain, one that's long starved but still aggressive. As for Cillian Murphy, I think that he's being held back. My theory is that he's being reserved for a major return in one of the sequels. He's much too important to the franchise to just drop casually. They're simply playing the long game. Now, one of the major talking points that's come up, especially among longtime fans, is the whereabouts of Jim, played by Cillian Murphy. It's been confirmed that he won't be appearing in 28 years later, but he's expected to return in the sequels. That opens up a lot of speculation about what he's been up to during all of this time. If we think back to 28 days later, Jim survived the initial outbreak alongside Selena and Hannah. The ending of the original left us with a bit of hope. The trio had found temporary safety in a remote cottage, and the help from a passing jet hinted that some form of rescue or recovery was underway. So where is Jim now? One theory is that he's been living in a quarantined or isolated zone, possibly outside of the UK. It's been nearly 3 decades after all, which is more than enough time for survivors to rebuild scattered communities. If he escaped the infected zones early enough, he might have settled into a safer society and is only now learning of a resurgence or evolution of the rage virus. Another idea is that Jim has been working behind the scenes, gathering intelligence, or maybe even involved with resistance groups, scientists, or governments attempting to stop future outbreaks. His absence in this first film might actually be deliberate, saving his reintroduction for a pivotal moment in the sequels when his return will have more weight. There is also the chance that the world thinks that Jim is dead, or that he is in hiding for a reason tied directly to the virus or its origins. Maybe he knows something crucial, or maybe the trauma of what he has seen has kept him away from society altogether. Either way, keeping him off screen in this first film helps build anticipation and leaves us wondering what kind of man he's become after all of this time. In another scene, we see a dramatic moment in which it shows an infected being struck by what looks like a flaming or explosive arrow that is fired from the island's fortress, suggesting that the islanders have resorted to more primitive methods to defend themselves. We also get a glimpse of Spike, who is played by Alfie Williams, aiming a bow and arrow over a lake, perhaps on a supply run or in training. In another scene, we're shown a high-speed pursuit again. The infected in this scene looks starved, but fast. And then we see that long-haired, red-eyed infected again, possibly the same one who ambushed the soldiers at the start of the trailer. Could this be the new face of the virus? A consistent antagonist that is mutated, but aware?
For this is a glorious day. A day of judgment.
My children! There's no discharge in the war.
And then we reach the final haunting moment. a priest delivering a fiery sermon about Judgment Day. But here's the twist. He embraces the infection. "Yes, my children," he shouts, just as the infected come crashing through the stained glass windows. It's downright chilling. The man's eyes flash red the instant he turns, suggesting that he's not only infected, but fully conscious of it. If that's not a cult leader, then I honestly don't know who is. One of the most striking elements in this trailer is the cult imagery. It's not just there for shock, it's symbolic. The rage virus is being portrayed as something divine and even purifying, and that priest, he doesn't flee or scream, he embraces the infection, calling out to it with open arms. That tells us everything. This isn't just someone who's lost hope, it's someone who believes. This cult doesn't just tolerate the virus, they worship it. And it's clear that the cult is going to play a huge role in the film. Now, they might be actively spreading the infection, offering sacrifices to it, or manipulating desperate survivors. It's possible that they've taken over large parts of the island, enforcing their beliefs with brutal fanaticism. One of the most unsettling elements in the new trailer is the presence of masked cults. Eerie, silent figures that seem to operate outside the rules of both the infected and the remaining survivors. Their twisted rituals, the bone temples, and their reverence for death all suggest something far more disturbing than simple survival. So why did these cults form? And more importantly, why are they worshipping the infected? The most likely explanation is that after decades of living in a world ruled by chaos, death, and infection, some groups completely broke down psychologically. When traditional beliefs and structures collapse, religion, government, science, people start searching for meaning in the madness. For some, that might have meant clinging to old systems, but for others, it may have meant turning toward the very thing that destroyed their world, the infected. To them, the infected might be seen as divine or transcendent, unstoppable forces of nature, cleansers of a corrupt world. By worshipping them, the cult believes they've accepted the inevitable. They're no longer running or hiding from the virus. They've embraced it. The rituals and skull towers suggest a belief system built around sacrifice and submission, possibly to gain favor with the infected or to spare themselves from being attacked. It's the same kind of twisted logic you see in apocalypse cults, the idea that offering death gives them control or at least some protection. There's also the possibility that some of these cults believe that the infected are the next stage in human evolution, faster, more primal, stripped of fear and weakness. If that's the case, then their worship isn't out of fear, it's out of envy. They see the rage virus not as a curse, but instead as a gift. Whatever the reason, these cults aren't just a threat, they're an ideology. And that makes them far more dangerous than the actual infected themselves. The infected don't think, but the cults do. And that kind of fanaticism could spell disaster for anyone still clinging to hope. Now let's discuss the symbolism of the Bone Temple. The Bone Temple shown in the trailer is a powerful visual that represents how far humanity has fallen. A structure made from human remains suggests that a group no longer sees death as something to mourn, but something to use instead. It could symbolize a twisted belief system where the infected, or the concept of death itself, is worshipped. It may have started as a memorial to the dead, but over time turned into something grotesque and ritualistic. It shows that these people have completely abandoned the values of the old world and embraced the chaos. The Bone Temples, haunting towers made entirely of human skulls. They're disturbing, and they seem to serve more than just a ritualistic purpose. The scale of these structures suggests that death has become normalized, even revered. The skulls are usually a reminder of mortality, but here they're displayed with pride, like religious monuments. This could symbolize a total abandonment of the old world's values. Death has become a power, a statement, a warning. These towers might show dominance over the living and the infected, totems of fear, saying, "We've survived, we've killed, we own death." They may also have a spiritual meaning. In many cultures, bones represent the afterlife. The cult might have believed that the infected are divine punishment, and by building with the bones, they're trying to appease that force, or even to become one with it. They could also serve as territorial markers. This is cult land. Enter and you'll join the pile. Now let's discuss how the cult was able to build bone temples without attracting the infected. One theory is that the cult has isolated themselves in a remote area, somewhere that the infected don't often reach, protected by cliffs, water, or other natural barriers. That would give them the space and the safety to build and carry out their rituals. Another possibility is that the cult has studied the infected long enough to learn how to avoid triggering them. Maybe they've figured out what senses the infected rely on: sound, light, movement, scent, and they operate in complete silence, using strategies to remain undetected. They may use blood or remains to ward off the infected by making the area seem already consumed. But here's a much darker theory. What if the cult doesn't just avoid the infected? What if they coexist with them? Maybe they sacrifice outsiders to them in exchange for peace. Or even more chilling, what if some of the infected are part of the cult? If the virus has evolved to allow fragments of thought, the line between human and infected might not be so clear anymore. Now, here's one of my theories for the potential plot of the film. One theory that I explore is that Spike's mentor, Jamie, possibly a survivor teaching him how to scavenge and survive, is temporarily separated from him, maybe due to a cult seen wearing masks, who could be planning a ritualistic sacrifice. Along the way, Spike and the others encounter a baby, possibly left behind during a breach of the fortress by the infected. A lone soldier with blonde hair whose team was ambushed may end up protecting Jodie Comer's character and Spike and the baby along with the others. Their journey could then lead them to Dr. Kelson in search for answers, possibly even a cure. Rudyard Kipling's poem Boots was first published in 1903 as part of his collection, The Five Nations. The poem is a part of the Service Songs series within that collection, and it's believed to have been written specifically for the Five Nations. The poem was written during the height of the Second Boer War. The most striking feature of this segment of the poem is the relentless repetition. Boots, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. This creates a hypnotic marching cadence that mirrors the monotony and mental toll of military life. It's as if the speaker is trapped in an endless cycle, a metaphor for both the physical grind of war and the psychological breakdown that it causes. Now, let's discuss the themes of the poem. The first theme is psychological deterioration. Lines like men, 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 go mad with watching 'em, and keep me from going lunatic reflect the sheer mental exhaustion of constant war. There's no relief, no escape, hence why there's no discharge in the war. Another theme would be the futility and endless marching. The numbers and distances 7, 6, 11, 5, 20 mile today suggest the pointlessness of their daily routine. Soldiers march endlessly without purpose or progress. And the third theme would be the theme of survival and control. If your eyes drop, they get atop of you, implies constant vigilance. A slip in awareness can mean death. The war demands both mental and physical control at all times. And you're probably wondering, how does this all fit into the 28 years later trailer? Well, in the trailer's context, the use of boots likely serves to do the following things. The first would be to highlight the dehumanization and repetition of post-apocalyptic survival. Another would be to reflect a soldier or survivor's mental descent as they face unrelenting threats. It also sets an eerie, unsettling tone through the rhythmic, almost chant-like reading of the poem. It also works brilliantly with the visuals of the infected, the soldiers, and the chaos, all caught in the loop of violence and madness, reinforcing the message that there's no escape, no discharge, not even in death. So, here's my final thoughts on the trailer. The use of Kipling's boots throughout the entire trailer, man, that just elevates this whole thing. The poem was written during wartime to express the futility of endless marching and repetition. In this context, it symbolizes the madness, the loss of time, and the psychological collapse of civilization. Playing it repeatedly, well, that would break anyone. It's genius, and it shows how this film isn't just about gore, it's about control. 28 years later isn't just a sequel, it's an evolution. We've got Tool using infected, religious cults, island societies, and high emotional stakes. Cillian Murphy might not be here yet, but this world feels ready to carry the story forward without him for now. So what do you guys think? Was the red-eyed, long-haired infected the same person from the start? Is Spike being sent on a suicide mission? And will Cillian Murphy return in part 2 or part 3? Make sure to leave a like on this video if you haven't already, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want more breakdown analysis videos like this. And until next time, stay safe out there. And don't forget, do not open the gates.